All right, everybody, welcome back to the RocaNews Show. It is Monday, September 29th, and we have a special producer in the producer chair today. Rob, welcome to the show.
Yo.
How we doing? So Billy is away on a trip, and we're going through with the show anyways. We have a lot going on, and let's start with this. It was a big weekend in the college football world. You had Virginia upset Florida State on Friday night. Boo, go Noles, but crazy field storming. Then you had Zach Bryan and John Mayer set the all-time ticketed attendance record in the U.S., 112,000. Packed the big house in Ann Arbor, Michigan, beating what George Strait set at Texas A&M and College Station. And now you have Paul Finebaum running for Senate. Rob, can we check out this opening clip? Here we go.
Tommy Tuberville is running for governor, a former Auburn coach who beat Alabama 6 times in a row, and I think it's fair to say he's going to win pretty comfortably, seems to be the assessment. There's an open Senate seat. Bruce Pearl, also at Auburn, had talked about it. He says now he's not going to run. Is that with the conversation? Are you somewhat interested and intrigued at the opportunity of looking into that Senate race? I'm assuming that's what they reached out to you to talk to you about.
Yes, I was very cautious. I didn't take it too seriously. And then ultimately, I ended up talking to someone who made it clear that there was a desire for me to be involved. And this person, obviously, that shall remain nameless, was compelling and compassionate.
All right, so that's Paul Finebaum. For those of you who don't know who he is the leading SEC analyst for ESPN. I should say college football analyst, but he's basically North Korean state media for Southern football. And I saw Larry's tweet where he'll be on the House floor if he wins, or Senate floor, and they'll be like, all right, Senator Finebaum, and he'll say, I'm going to cede my time to Frank from Macon, who's going to talk. So Frank, because he does the call-in show. But that's an unbelievable development. I mean, we're at the point where Tommy Tuberville, Alabama senator, and he's in the state of Alabama. And then now you have Paul Finebaum, who, after tons of speculation that retiring Auburn basketball coach Bruce Pearl would run for the seat, nope. We're sticking with the college sports world. I mean, this just goes to speak with Paul Finebaum. Now, this just goes to speak to how massive college sports are to Southern culture and how influential they are. So just an incredible story there. But you know what? Let's get into today's news. We're going to talk about a few of the big stories, what you need to know in the world today, and then we're going to go into a fascinating debate that's tearing the left in two. So that'll be at the end of the show. But let's start off with 2 big meetings President Trump was scheduled to have today. The first has already taken place. The second is supposed to take place shortly, and that is about the government shutdown. So right now, the government is set to partially shut down on Wednesday, just after midnight, if they don't reach a short-term spending deal. Now, this is extremely important because if they do not reach a spending deal, numerous government employees will be laid off permanently. And this is, by the way, the first meeting President Trump has had with Democratic leadership since returning to office in January. So this is a unique meeting. Right now, the Republicans need Democratic support because they need 60 votes in the Senate to get this funding package passed. And they are going to, shocker, blame each other if this doesn't work out. Essentially, the Democrats are demanding that the funding extension includes provisions to extend the Affordable Care Act. They also want Trump to reverse the Medicaid cuts from earlier this year. So right now, Hakeem Jeffries, their leader in the House, is calling the healthcare cuts a 5-alarm fire. Trump said that, listen, if this doesn't get passed, it will be the Democrats' fault. So that's going on right now. Hopefully they'll get a deal done. I mean, this has become just sort of an annual affair at this point. And so that's the latest. We'll see how that meeting goes. We'll keep you posted. But will the government lights stay on? Let's wait and see. Just another day in the country. Now we go to a meeting that has taken place today, and this is still sort of coming out. We're getting new reports by the minute, but Trump and Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, have met today to discuss a peace deal. Now, to be clear, They announced a plan, a 21-point plan, but Hamas has not yet agreed to it. So the peace proposal that they discussed is very detailed. It was developed with input from former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, and it essentially outlines a plan that would see Gaza being governed by an apolitical Palestinian committee. It will be under international oversight. And then eventually the Palestinian Authority will take control after certain reforms are passed. Netanyahu, by the way, is facing pressure from coalition partners who oppose any Palestinian Authority involvement or mention of a Palestinian state. So he's got people, it's been a recurring theme in his cabinet, who are to the right of him, who are hardliners, who don't want anyone in the Palestinian Authority to have a say of what happens at the Gaza Strip or West Bank. But this is the agreement they reached. So this is something of a compromise for Netanyahu. Some would say it's not very generous, but to some of the right-wingers in his cabinet, it is. Rob, do you have anything else we should add to this story? Anything about the Qatar situation or anything else?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Netanyahu basically publicly apologized and privately apologized to Qatar's prime minister for violating their sovereign airspace in the strikes that they had a few weeks ago. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but it's a very interesting situation to hear a world leader basically admit to and then apologize for something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of atypical of Netanyahu as well, but you'd have to imagine there may be some pressure from behind the scenes with Trump, who publicly has been more critical toward Netanyahu in recent weeks. So we shall see what happens next. Hopefully there is a peace agreement. So far, Egypt and United Arab Emirates have expressed support for this initiative, but we will see what happens with Hamas's leadership. So there you go, another update. And on a completely different note, we have an exciting deal going on. It's exciting to, especially our audience who does not care much for geopolitics and much prefers to play NCAA football in their basement. But EA Sports, and the biggest private deal ever, the biggest private equity or the private acquisition ever, Electronic Arts, EA Sports, has agreed to be taken private for $55 billion. This is an enormous deal, but what's more interesting about it is who's behind it. So behind the deal are some very interesting names like Jared Kushner's Affinity Partners in Silver Lake, and also the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. They are behind a huge chunk of that deal, and this is sort of fascinating. Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, by the way, already owned about 10% of EA, and now this EA is going private. So super interesting deal. It's obviously, been one of the most iconic and successful brands in entertainment over the last few decades. Madden, you have obviously FIFA, you have NCAA, and it is a monster company. It's kind of funny in media, there's always a sense that a company's brand outpaces its actual monetary value because people love to talk about news, they love to talk about media. But this is an example where, oh no, EA makes a shit ton of money. So for context, it's 7 times more valuable than the New York Times, the most valuable strictly news company. So big deal there. Rob, anything to add? What do you think of this deal?
Yeah, I'm curious for your take. I mean, are you surprised that they got this high of a valuation? Because I've been playing Madden for 20 years and it hasn't changed once in the past 10.
I know.
Where they're putting their money.
I'm not as much of a gamer. This is where Billy would be super helpful. I'm just shocked that the number's this big, frankly.
It's crazy.
It also owns The Sims. Like, it's not just sports. And FIFA's huge, but I did not think it was in the $55 billion territory.
I will say this: they kind of pioneered the whole idea of microtransactions. Like now, Fortnite makes millions and millions of dollars in those microtransactions. I feel like Madden and FIFA with the Ultimate Team, with buying the player cards, was like the the first foray into that for video games. I mean, they make bank on not just selling the game, but selling games within the games. That might be where
Dude,
that value
totally.
is.
Some gameception there. But, dude, you're spot on. And it goes to show in media, it's not just about reach or, size of your audience. It's how well you can monetize. And they've clearly done an amazing job of that. The deal, by the way, is expected to close in 2026. It still is awaiting approval from the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., but something tells me, given Kushner's involvement, there won't be a major concern there. So, fascinating development. Also, quick update on the Michigan LDS church shooting. We learned the motives today of the shooter, who, by the way, is a Trump supporter and has railed against the LDS church, the Mormon church. A White House official says that the church shooter was a Marine veteran. Here we go with CBS, who hated people of the Mormon faith. Super, super bleak situation there. Obviously, his name's Jacob Sanford. Drove his vehicle through the front doors of the church, fired multiple rounds from an assault rifle during Sunday services, killed at least 4 people, 8 others injured. And so just a terrible situation, but thought we'd share that and keep it consistent with us disclosing Tyler Robinson's motives. So prayers up for that community in Michigan. Obviously a horrific situation. Sounds like a super peaceful community there. Saw the press announcement from one of its leaders. So there you go. Okay, now let's end, speaking of bleak, with the Walmart CEO's warning about AI. So Walmart CEO Doug McMillon has warned about AI reshaping jobs while announcing plans to keep its global workforce flat over the next 3 years. So this is a super interesting development because we've heard different leaders across the business world have totally different takes on AI. For example, you have Mark Benioff at Salesforce saying, hold on, AI is doing a ton of our work now. We're definitely not going to be hiring any new salespeople or coders. And he's sort of signaling signs that they're going to reduce workforce. And Walmart saying that they're going to keep it flat. But it's just another interesting data point in the major question that, at times we're kind of wondering why it isn't a bigger deal of, oh, holy shit, could AI replace, tens of millions of jobs in the next few years? Right now, you see all these surveys, like one from the Reuters Institute that found that 85% of business executives believe AI will transform their companies over the next 5 years. Transform. I mean, that's a pretty major verb there. Walmart, by the way, is there's a fascinating map that shows like how the biggest private employer by state, and Walmart claims that title, and I think over half the states, it employs 2.1 million people. So hey, at least it's staying flat. I mean, that's all you can ask for them. Here's a fascinating map. Rob's got it up. This is money. Check it out. So the private employer, okay, it's at 22 states.
Basically all of the South.
Yeah, basically all of the South. And I'm kind of surprised that they're counting University of Iowa as a private employer, and then the University of Nebraska. So it's either universities or you have the University of California system for California. But yeah, Walmart is all across the South, Wyoming, Montana, Arizona, New Hampshire. So super interesting. Huge player here. And shout out Doug McMillon on that announcement. So our final segment for today's show that we're going to end with is on a fascinating debate that sort of played out over the weekend in the New York Times. So let me give some context. The debate is between Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's a very prominent progressive writer. He is an outspoken advocate of racial reparations. He is a hugely influential intellectual on the left, including for the likes of Obama and other major Democratic figures. and he's shaped a lot of the debate as sort of the far end, but on DEI and equity and racial justice and all these major topics. And most recently, he's spoken out for Palestinian rights and the Palestinian cause. And then on the other side of the debate, you have Ezra Klein, who co-founded Vox, who is sort of more of a moderate liberal. Well, his politics are actually quite left, but he engages with people across the spectrum. He recently wrote a book about called Abundance alongside Derek Thompson of The Atlantic, essentially making the case that Democrats need to build a lot more housing to win. They need to be much more in the abundance mindset. And to get back on track, they need to listen to the interests of, their constituents. And he controversially stated that maybe Democrats should run a pro-life Senate candidate in Arkansas or Missouri or other red states to have a fighting chance, and so they can enact some of their Democratic policies without having these sort of purity tests. So long story short, you have these two clashing over Ezra Klein's recent piece that essentially said Charlie Kirk practiced politics the right way. His death is a tragedy. He published a piece the day after Charlie Kirk was shot, and the uproar on the left was sort of surprising. You had the Times published a few days later letters to the editor staunchly disavowing the piece. Just this weekend, it published a piece from Nicole Hannah-Jones, the architect of the 1619 Project, and she totally disavowed the piece. She described Charlie Kirk as hateful, and she began her piece with an anecdote about a dad who saw his kid come home from school sad about the Charlie Kirk death and him being conflicted about it because he's like, okay, I don't want to, dash her sadness, but also this guy was awful. And so, in other words, the New York Times distanced itself from it, and Ta-Nehisi Coates, has also disavowed it in his own piece, I believe, in Vanity Fair. So we're going to play a couple clips from it before talking about it. So let's hit this opening clip.
I actually think, and I've thought about this a lot in reaction I have read in the last couple of weeks, I've thought a lot about how many people believe we are already in a cold civil war, that we are in a time that we are dealing with divisions and questions. I see it on the right, for sure. I hear it on the left. I have a lot of email that's like, we need a national divorce. How that's going to be effectuated, never exactly clear.
Do people
They do use that.
Do people you respect say that to you?
Well, yes, actually, I will say that. But I'm not going to, people say things to me that are off the record and I shouldn't say it. But you don't believe that, though, right? You don't believe we are at a point. I think this is really important. I actually think, and I've thought about...
Can we go to another clip, too? I think we have another on that... here, we'll get to that shortly. But I think it's on another tab, maybe, about another Ta-Nehisi Coates clip, the one where he talks about how Charlie Kirk was a hate monger. Here, if you just type in Ta-Nehisi Coates, I can filibuster in the meantime just to say that... Ezra Klein here interestingly takes the more the bearish position of saying that we might be confronting a civil war in the U.S., and the Ta-Nehisi Coates denies that. But with the real debate they had was essentially Ezra Klein believes that although Charlie Kirk was wrong about a ton of policy issues, he believes that he practiced politics the right way by going on to college campuses, and we can play this clip in a second, but by going on college campuses and trying to persuade people and engaging people who think differently. And Ezra Klein's a big advocate of civil discourse. Ta-Nehisi Coates says, hold on, don't normalize this guy Charlie Kirk because he was a hate monger, is the word he used, and that he basically spoke terrible things about trans people, about immigrants, about black people, and he sort of cited a litany of quotes that Charlie Kirk had over the years and said dude, don't normalize this guy. He was awful, and I don't like to compromise. Even if our party's losing in elections, like, we're not going to normalize people like Charlie Kirk. And he defined his claims about trans people as hate speech and said they lead to violence. Now, here's him talking about it, just so you get a flavor of how he approached it. But we'll get into that in a sec.
I don't take any joy in saying this, but we sometimes soothe ourselves by pointing out that love, acceptance, warmth, that these are powerful forces. I believe they are. I also believe hate is a powerful force. I believe it's a powerful, powerful unifying force. And I think Charlie Kirk was a hate monger. You know, I really need to say this over and over again. I have a politic that rejects violence, that rejects political violence. I take no joy in the killing of anyone, no matter what they said. But if you ask me what the truth of his life was, you know, the truth of his public life, I would have to tell you it's hate. I would tell you I'd have to tell you it is the usage of hate and the harnessing of hate towards political ends. I don't take any.
So, okay, the debate they had that is so relevant to questions about how we move forward as a country, how the media should sort of approach discourse, who to have on, the debates about who to platform. People love that verb. They come down to Ezra Klein versus Ta-Nehisi Coates, where Ta-Nehisi Coates essentially says, we both have a line of who you wouldn't have on your show, of who you wouldn't deem a worthy political opponent or sparring partner. And Ta-Nehisi Coates says Charlie Kirk has passed that line for him. And many on the left agree with that. That's certainly what Nicole Hannah-Jones believes, as published in the New York Times. The top comments on Ezra Klein's piece about Charlie Kirk were all saying that Ezra Klein was wrong and that Charlie was over the line and that he delegitimized marginal groups like trans community, like the black community, etc., and that his speech led to violence and jeopardized people. They all think Charlie Kirk was beyond that. And Ezra Klein says, okay, I don't agree with him, but in some of his views I do believe have bad consequences. But Democrats are losing in this country. Most people in America, to the tune of 75%, believe that trans women shouldn't be playing in women's sports, for example. So your thing about Charlie Kirk going after the trans community, that's a view, as you define it, going after the trans community, that's a view that most Americans hold. Or dismantling DEI. That's something that most Americans, including a significant number of black Americans, support. So they had this debate of where to draw the line, and I can't help but think, especially in the context of their first clip about the Civil War, that if they draw the line so harshly as Coates proposes, that's going to have terrible implications. I mean, if you stop, it's ironic that Coates doesn't believe we're in a cold Civil War when he considers Charlie Kirk past that line, past the point of redeemability, past the point of platforming. To me, that's crazy. And I think it's going to be hard. He also writes off much of the country. Ezra Klein brought up Hillary Clinton's infamous deplorables line. And Ta-Nehisi Coates says, I wouldn't have said it that way, which is an interesting response because he sort of disavows it and says, I wouldn't have said it that way. But that also isn't the same as I don't believe half the country's deplorable. He kind of seems to believe that. So that is sort of a shocking thing to say where you sort of view Charlie Kirk's views as irredeemable when a huge chunk of Americans hold those views. And the question of whether, certainly the noisy left on social media is taking Ta-Nehisi Coates' side. The question is, what will your typical Democratic voters in Ohio or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin believe? Do they think Charlie Kirk's past the point of redeemability? Do they think that there should be such a hard line? And Ta-Nehisi Coates argues, well, you know, if you were more practical, Ezra, if you were a Southern Democrat in the 1890s, or Southern Republican, I should say, because Republicans were anti-slavery and pro-Reconstruction and getting former slaves involved in politics, then you would have said, okay, we shouldn't move so fast with black rights because it's unpopular. Ezra Klein saying we're not at that point. That's kind of his argument. Is like, I know, I get what you're saying. You don't compromise with Nazis or slave owners or whatever extreme examples from history Coates chooses to cite. He's saying that here and now, that's not true. Charlie Kirk's views on trans people are not the same as slavery, or Charlie Kirk's views about black people or DEI are not the same as Jim Crow laws. So they kind of had this debate. I mean, Rob, I'm curious to hear what you believe.
Yeah, well, I actually want to ask you a question because you watched this whole interview, right?
Yeah.
I haven't caught any of it, and I'm just curious because Ta-Nehisi Coates says there, like, my politics rejects political violence, which is great to hear. But then, like, did he offer a solution to what he believes should be done with these people whose rhetoric he finds incorrigible? Like, was there something where he was like, this is how we deal with these people? Because if it's not violence, I'm curious if you're opposing your whole political ideology to somebody else. How do you handle that?
I'll give you a generous reading, and then I'll give you maybe more of a cynical reading. So in the interview, he kept saying, my role as a writer is different than your role as, even though Ezra Klein's a writer and sort of political commentator, he's also more politically involved. Like, he's in the ears of a ton of governors. He's thinking about the politics. He thinks politics are a super useful tool to enacting change. Ta-Nehisi Coates keeps talking. He zooms out and he says, I don't really care what happens in the next 10 years. A lot of it's noise. And he talks about how Martin Luther King in this interview advocated for love and they shot him. And he's talking about, like, if you move to the middle and go for kumbaya, you still might get shot. So he says he rejects violence, but he also is a hardliner. And he, for example, hated some of what President Obama did, but he acknowledges, well, he's a politician and politicians have to make compromises. He says he doesn't. He says he doesn't want to. He says his job is to tell truth. That's exactly what he chooses to do. So he doesn't really have a clear solution. He also argued that the left isn't losing as badly as Ezra Klein makes it seem. Ezra Klein was like, listen, the conservatives have 6 Supreme Court seats. Trump got 312 electoral votes in the last election. They have, congressional control. They control most state legislatures and state governorships. They're owning the country right now. But then Ta-Nehisi Coates goes, listen, white people, that he said it that explicitly. He was like, white people that we have now in politics are better than we've ever had them. So he's like, we're actually doing pretty well because a lot of people are woker than ever. So he's like, it might seem bleak now, but it seemed bleak in 2005 when 3 years before Obama came onto the scene, and it seemed bleak in 2010. He's like, listen.
I would just say, like, as a political observer, I think this is the worst in my lifetime the left has ever been off, politically, culturally especially. And the people, the Nicole Hannah-Joneses of the world have a hand in that and creating an environment that, like, allies don't even want to be a part of anymore.
Dude, I think that's spot on. Also, you're not just, it's not like a hot take. Like, the polls show that. Right. So if anyone's like, well, that's your opinion, the Democratic Party is at a 35 low popularity according to a survey that's been conducted for 35 years. They are very unpopular right now. So, I mean, they clearly have messaging issues at the very least. Ta-Nehisi Coates sort of views himself as above that, and fair enough. But now the harsher view of what he said is Ta-Nehisi Coates is sort of bringing up all these old Kirk quotes and saying, like, how hateful it was. We have a tweet here, and I confirmed this from a transcript of how Ta-Nehisi Coates reacted after 9/11. Here's what he says. So this is Ta-Nehisi Coates. He says, okay, I would never, here he goes, but looking out, this after 9/11, looking out upon the ruins of America, my heart was cold. I would never consider any American citizen pure. I kept thinking about how Southern Manhattan had always been ground zero for us. They auctioned our bodies down there in the same devastated and rightly named financial district. And there's once a burial ground for the auction there. All I know is that bin Laden was not the first man to bring terror to that section of the city. I never forgot that, neither should you. And the days after, I watched the ridiculous pageantry of flags, the machismo of firemen, the overwrought slogans. Damn it all. I could see no difference between the officer who killed Prince Jones and the police who died. I believe, by the way, this is from Between the World and Me, a book I've read, because I kind of remember him talking about that. And Prince Jones was someone who was killed by a cop, black guy. They were not human to me, black, white, or whatever. They were not human. I mean, this is an outrageous take about the cops and firefighters in southern Manhattan. Now, I personally don't believe Ta-Nehisi Coates should be banned from discourse because he dehumanized heroes that day. But, I mean, if you're going to play the old quote game, Ta-Nehisi Coates has some out there claims. And, I mean, I'll give him this. He was civil in the debate with Ezra Klein. He didn't call for any heads, and he continued to condemn the murder of Charlie Kirk. But he also says this guy was a hateful dude. We talked about this on a recent show, but Ta-Nehisi Coates talking about how Charlie Kirk was so full of hate and all he did was spew hate and he was a hate monger. This gets back to that core idea we keep revisiting about the link between speech and violence. And for Ta-Nehisi Coates, it's as simple as this. Charlie Kirk advocating against trans women in women's sports and criticizing gender ideology, he believes has immediately violent and harmful effects for that population. And so he disqualified Charlie Kirk because he believes that Charlie Kirk is doing harm to a group of people. And similarly, the same with black people. He thinks that when Charlie Kirk had that line about Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama being underqualified for their positions because they had lower standards due to affirmative action, Ta-Nehisi Coates thinks it has violent consequences for black people. And so that opinion Charlie Kirk utters results in violence. And so that creates this weird, almost like trump card. I kind of view it as cheating in discourse where you say, no, your view, your opinion that you hold and that half the country holds, or in this case, more than half the country, that is a violent view. And to me, I just think of a lot of people I know who hold the view. A lot of the people who go around the country hold the view. And to say that they're committing violence by believing that is just a stretch. And if you anchor your worldview in 1850s America, then I could see you having more of a hardline take on these topics where you say, no, we're not going to compromise. Or if you anchor your views in 1930s Germany, I could see that if that's your standard, then you're going to sort of see anyone who disagrees with you as the 1930s as the modern day equivalent of Nazis, then yeah, I probably would not budge in debating them. But I think you have to sort of have this sort of iOS update mentally to say we're not there anymore. So this is the debate that's ravaging the left, the debate between Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ezra Klein. Ta-Nehisi Coates says that Charlie Kirk should not be memorialized at all, that we should disavow the violence, political violence committed against him, but beyond that, done. There's nothing else, nothing redeemable about him. He was a hate monger, and if anything, we should condemn him now that the dust is settled. Then Ezra Klein goes, hold on, he was at least engaging with the other side. And in a moment of extreme polarization, we need more of that. We need more attempts at persuasion. We need more people going to college campuses, even if you say things that are abysmal. And I think similarly, the rhetoric on the right about all this they, I keep hearing this word they from the likes of Matt Walsh and Elon Musk, where they talk about they killed Charlie, or they burned down cities in the summer of 2020, or they tried to kill Trump, or whatever else it is. That is also totally unfair. That's totally delegitimizing to an entire group of people. So if Ta-Nehisi Coates is serious that he doesn't believe we're in a cold civil war, I think he needs to move his Overton window. That is the window of acceptable views, because Charlie Kirk, by any standard, was in that window of sort of middle 80% of American views. And anyway, so that debate is worth watching. I'm going to be publishing a deep dive on it. But that's the news for today. So the Netanyahu-Trump meeting, then Trump's pending meeting with Democratic leadership in Congress. Paul Finebaum running for Senate. The EA Sports deal. So much happened today. Rob, thank you for joining.
Shout out Roca Nation.
Shout out Roca Nation. And for all of you who watch, please subscribe to our YouTube. For all who listen, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple, on Spotify. Give it 5 stars. Tell us why you like it. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on the Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ezra Klein debate. Super interesting one. I recommend you checking it out. We'll link to a gifted version of the article in the description. But there you go. Shout out to the Packers and Cowboys fans for 4 hours tie last night. 40-40, second highest tie ever, I believe, and a high scoring tie. And what a weekend in sports. Hope you all had a great weekend, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you all very much.